Welcome to AFA's virtual Aerospace Warfare Symposium Daily Highlight Report, brought to you by L3 Harris. I'm Tobias Naegeli, Editor-in-Chief at Air Force Magazine.
And I'm Amy McCullough, Air Force Magazine's news editor.
Chief of Space Operations General Jay Raymond offered his most candid public statements on the threats facing U.S. and allied satellites in space. In a wide-ranging discussion with noted astrophysicist and author Neil deGrasse Tyson, Raymond itemized the threats and also the rivals who wield them.
Well, Russia launched a satellite right up next to one of our satellites, opened up, if you will, and released another satellite. We saw this behavior before a few years back, and that second satellite has the capability of releasing a projectile, and we know it is designed to kinetically destroy U.S. satellites in low Earth orbit. China today on orbit has a satellite that has a robotic arm. That robotic arm can be used in the future to grab a satellite, if you will. And then there's also cyber threats that we're concerned about. So that threat spectrum exists today. It is very broad. It is robust. That both China and Russia are continuing to develop those threats, and it's something that we have to protect against today. And that's why the establishment of the United States Space Force is so important. We are purpose-built to stay ahead of that growing threat.
The establishment of the new service was not the launch of U.S. space activities, of course. Tyson cited the military's long history in space leading up to the birth of the Space Force.
Many people's first thought was that if the government creates a Space Force, then that's a first step in the militarization of space, and all I can think of is the movies where there are sort of laser weapons and this sort of thing. And I've tried to remind people or alert them perhaps for the first time, that ever since Sputnik, space has been recognized as a strategic asset, or rather a strategic location. And so for the past 60 years, space has been the place for reconnaissance satellites and navigation. And so it's not a new thing, it's actually an old thing that is finally getting recognized in the way it needs to be, in terms of within the sort of the umbrella of national security.
The Space Force recently selected the name Guardian to describe its members. So what does it mean to be a Guardian? Vice Chief of Space Operations General D.T. Thompson offered this definition at vAWS.
Someone who needs to be bold, someone who needs to be visionary, somebody who needs to be innovative, somebody who has a deep technical and operational understanding of the domain we operate in, which is fundamentally different from any other operating domain, who understands the threats, who understands the capabilities we provide, the importance of those capabilities, and understands what they walk into the room with the rest of the joint force, the expectation of them, what they provide, how they're expected to integrate, and the expertise they need to bring to everything that we need to do.
Chief Master Sergeant of the Space Force, Roger Toberman, added that today's Guardians will have the opportunity to define over time what that term means in the future. In the meantime, he's getting ready to roll out new Space Force rank insignia, and uniforms are coming too.
We're about to roll out some test rank insignias next month. We're excited about that, to get feedback and figure out what that insignia looks like, and new uniforms and all those things coming up later in the year.
Technology is changing rapidly across the Air Force, accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic, which jump-started the Air Force's cloud computing strategy. A year ago, the Department of the Air Force had just 7,000 VPN connections. Now it has 100 times as many. The department's Chief Information Officer, Laura Nossenberger, said the impact isn't just the ability to get work done now. It's about readiness worldwide tomorrow.
We can operate anywhere. You know, we're showing it right now with COVID, but we've also shown it in our air operations centers. You know, we can shut down an air operations center in an area of the world pretty quickly, and we can run it back to one location in the U.S., or we can run it back to many locations in the U.S. And that is something that we are increasingly preparing ourselves for, is that, you know, the fight is not just in one physical place, and it's not too hard to take out one physical place. But it is incredibly hard to take out a globally distributed force that can connect and work from anywhere.
COVID-19 vaccinations, meanwhile, are not moving quite as fast as they might across the forces. Many troops are reticent to receive the new shots, which have tentative emergency approval from the FDA. Chief Master Sergeant Brian Krzelnik, Air Mobility Command's top enlisted leader, advised Air Force leaders to tackle concerns about the shots with straightforward, well-informed answers and to lead by example.
When you don't communicate early and often, the team will get its information elsewhere, he said during an AWS leadership panel, and what they get elsewhere may not be accurate. His message to leaders who are eligible: get vaccinated first and be public about it.
Trepidation is high across the force, according to the Joint Staff's Vice Director for Operations. Testifying recently in Congress, the officer, Air Force Major General Jeff Taliaferro, said 1 in 3 military troops offered the vaccine have declined. Refusal doesn't make them non-deployable, but it does get in the way of military efforts to stamp out COVID-19 across the force.
In Syria, Russia is conducting operations day in and day out that closely resemble a red flag combat exercise. Major General Deanna Burt, who heads Combined Force Space Component Command and is deputy commander of the Space Force's Space Operations Command, said Russia is doing work in the electromagnetic spectrum and blocking satellite communications and GPS in the space domain. She continued, "We're seeing a lot of electromagnetic spectrum activity and working to make sure we can mitigate that so it does not affect U.S. forces."
Thanks for watching, and be sure to tune in for the final day of vAWS 21, which begins tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp.
Tomorrow's events will include Acting Air Force Secretary John Roth, the leaders of U.S. Space Command and U.S. Northern Command, the final round of the Air Force's SparkTake Innovation Competition, and more.
We'll have more on-demand sessions on nuclear deterrence with Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Hyten, and Air Force Global Strike Command boss, General Ray. Plus sessions on Air Force training, mission integration, and Space Force planning and leadership.
We'll also have 5 more mission domain engagement sessions on topics ranging from electronic warfare to hypersonics. Check out Air Force Magazine's website, airforcemag.com, for comprehensive coverage of the Air Force and Space Force throughout the symposium and all year long.
And if you're not subscribed already, sign up for our daily report newsletter. No one covers the Air and Space Forces better. Thanks for watching.